Continuing on with sound, I thought I was going to make it through hearing and I just didn't make it. So moving on to how it actually works in your ear. So here at the top we have our oval window, so our inner ear bones sends that information from the sound waves, so that vibrations to the oval window that is sent into our cochlear, so this little spiral section here. So cutaway into our cochlear, focusing just on one of those channels. On the inside here, we have the outer portions that are just filled with fluid. We also have this inner portion that is where these sound waves are going to be sent through. So in this inner portion, we have our tectoral membrane that's going to that is attached to the hairs on our hair cells inside our cochlear. And below our hair cells, we have our basilar membrane. Our basilar membrane is actually going to move in response to those sound waves. So the basilar membrane, when it moves, it's going to cause the hair cells to change position. And the tectoral membrane, therefore, just by reason of attachment, is going to pull on those hair cells and causes the changes for sending an action potential. The action potential is then sent through the fibers of the cochlear nerve out the back of the cochlear and to join with the vestibular nerve to form your vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, so vibration from the ossicles, that vibration from the sound waves is sent to the cochlear, causing the basilar membrane, which is underneath the hair cells, to vibrate and therefore move. When the basilar membrane, so like my green pen, moves, it causes the hair cells above them to move. And because those hair cells, the hairs on them are embedded in that tectoral membrane, the hair cells are pulled. When they're pulled, when they are moved, then it helps to stimulate them. So instead of sodium coming into the cell, in this case, it's potassium that is moving into the cell in order to cause the action potential for that hair cell. So different parts of your basilar membrane will vibrate or move depending on the frequency of sound, so the pitch of the sound. So this is how your cochlear is able to determine the frequency or the pitch of the sound. So just like your touch mapping has a specific location, your sound mapping also does have a particular location for where that sound is responding. Okay, so here's our basilar membrane in the reddish color in the middle. So this shows our location of where our basilar membrane is moving. At the proximal end, the basilar membrane is thinner and is attached to your cochlear here, and then the rest of it is just basically a really long flag getting wider at the distal end. So your higher frequency sound is responded by the initial proximal end on our basilar membrane, so the closest one to receive the sensory information. So basically this is like your cochlear all rolled out, so like a Cinnabon, rolling our cochlear out to form a nice straight basilar membrane. Middle portion for more medium frequency sounds, so for example like your speech, and then at the distal end your lower bass sounding sounds. So these particular parts of the basilar membrane are going to vibrate hair cells that are right above it, telling the brain, hey, this sound is coming from the vibrations in this particular location of the basilar membrane, and so therefore that is that frequency of that sound. So being able to tell the difference between a bird chirping and a lion roaring. For coding of loudness, it depends on the levels of the basilar membrane. So louder sounds makes the basilar membrane vibrate more vigorously. So again, making bigger waves for bigger sounds. It also triggers higher frequency action potentials. So going back to touch, difference between a soft touch and a pinch or painful touch based on the signaling of the frequency based on the action potential. So more action potentials from particular location tells us that's a louder sound. Pitch, again, based on where part of the basilar membrane vibrates. So proximal end is high pitch, distal end is low pitch. So with your proximal end being higher pitch and closer to that energy transfer from your ear, it's also more likely to get damaged. So people who have hearing damage, or like you go to a concert and then maybe for a day or two after that concert you have this high pitch ringing, is because that proximal end has been damaged a little bit due to so much sound energy going into your ears because it's a great concert, but you did not wear earbuds in it because it's like, hey, I paid for this concert, I'm going to hear every bit of it. So that part gets damaged, and so because of the damage, your brain just starts making up stuff, and so that's what ends up you having that tinnitus or high-pitched ringing in your ears. That also just happens randomly, just sometimes, for whatever reason, we don't know why, but still ends up having that abnormal signaling in your brain, just brain making up stuff. Okay. So with, oh wait, that didn't move. So with your head having the sensory information, again, action potentials coming from the base of the hair cell, sending it to the cochlear nerve, then combining become your vestibular cochlear nerve, sending that information to both sides of the brainstem. So the reason for this is so we're able to locate where sound is coming from. So we have two ears, we have hearing from both sides of our head, able to determine where sound is coming from. So able to get signal from both ears, as in, okay, it's louder on one side and therefore and softer on the other. So the side where it's louder is where that information is coming from, so that sound is coming from. And that leads to our startle response. So loud bang on one side of the head causes us to turn our head towards that loud sound. So that, again, with binaural hearing, sound information coming from two different directions, telling our brain, hey, the sound is coming from this side because it's louder on that side. Eventually, that information is then sent to your primary auditory cortex, telling your brain the pitch and loudness and other characteristics of that sound. So able to determine what you're hearing. Eventually, that's sent to your association cortex, so you actually make sense of the sound. So primary auditory cortex, okay, hey, I heard something. Association auditory cortex, what did I hear? Moving on to equilibrium. So this is where we're able to figure out where we are in 3D space, as well as being able to be balanced in the space. Is based on the movement of hair cells in the vestibule and the semicircular ducts. So the saccule and utricle helps to determine your head position. So if, let's say, you're watching this on your, I don't know, maybe let's say you're in the library and you're watching this on a desktop or at work and decided to watch this instead of doing work, or you're like, hey, I'm not doing anything, might as well get some work in. Okay, so most likely most desktops are allowing for your head to be upright when you're focusing on the screen, compared to if you're looking at a laptop that's sitting in your lap, or if you're watching this on your phone sitting in your lap. You tilt your head, that causes the fluid in these chambers to move, which again pulls on those hair cells and tells the brain, hey, your head has been moved. Other way of determining your head movement is through your semicircular ducts. So they're arranged in different angles and orientations in space. And again, fluid moves, causing the hair cells to bend, and therefore, when those hair cells move, telling the brain, hey, you, for example, when the gymnast spins on the balance beam, causes that fluid to move, and therefore causing the hair cells to move, and telling the brain, hey, we've actually turned our head in space. So that's more of an extreme example. So you can even do this just from turning your head left and right. Might want to do that because you've probably been staring at your phone for a couple of minutes, and, you know, or screen or whatever. You know, kind of twist it around, get a little good stretch in your neck. So with those two different structures, you have your static equilibrium. This is when looking at your head position when your body is stationary. Dynamic or moving equilibrium when there's either motion or acceleration. So there's two types of acceleration. You have linear acceleration where you're moving in a straight line. So for example, in when you're moving in an elevator, that's still going to cause changes in the fluid in your inner ear structures of your saccule and utricle, so telling your brain that you actually are moving up and down. So for example, when like you go to the fair and you go to that one ride that, you know, puts you high up in the air and then drops you, part of that of course is your being actually to see that the ground is coming towards you, that you're being dropped. But the other is because of that linear acceleration due to those inner ear chambers that you're like, okay, head's moving, I'm moving too fast for comfort, this is scary, and you scream and you just have fun because you know that, you know, your safety board has gone through and inspected all those rides. For angular acceleration, this is when your head is rotating. So for example, depending on how fast you drive, when you're turning your car around a corner and you tend to tilt your head, it's due to you just kind of maintaining your balance as you're going around. So that is from movement in your semicircular ducts. Moving on to vision. So for vision, the only parts on the external surface of the eye that I want you to pay attention to are the pupil that allows light to come into the eye, your iris, which is your colored part of your eye that as it closes or opens helps to adjust the size of the pupil. So open and closes to adjust the size of the pupil. So the pupil basically is a big open area. And the last part, the sclera on the outside, very tough surface. So when we do the eye dissection, it's going to be kind of tough to cut through that, but this scalpels are sharp enough to do it. So accessory structures for the eye, stuff I want you to pay attention, don't care about the rest of them. You have your cornea, which is your outside front anterior surface of the eye, very hard. Basically, its job is to protect the front surface of your eye. Of course, it's exposed to the outside environment, so keeping your eye from getting scratched up. Your conjunctiva, so this is this little lid space where your eyelid goes over your eye. So this is, let's say you get something into your eye, this is about as far deep as it's going to go. So in order for it to actually cause some major stuff to happen against your eye, it would actually have to go through that area and into, so like stabbing through tissue in order to, you know, affect the rest of your eye. So it's not like going to get lost in the back of your eyeball. It's only stuck there. It just might be a little difficult to access the part wherever it's stuck. Another accessory structure are the lacrimal glands. So these are your tear glands, making tears or making kind of your fluid to wash the surface of your eye, keep it nice and clean. So it goes from one corner of the eye down towards the other corner of your eye, and then draining away in your lacrimal sac, then moving through the nasolacrimal duct, through your nasal cavity, and then out through your nostrils. So if you ever saw like a little kid like just outright temper tantrum, like big major crying where they kind of do that pause thing where they like take a breath before they really start crying, and then for some reason they're crying and there's snot running everywhere, it's because it is. So you have these tears moving through into that lacrimal sac, draining away through their nostrils. So actually basically it's tears coming out of their nose. Part of that's also snot because, you know, good and well, those kids don't actually, clean their nose. That's super hard to get them to blow their nose. So that's also at least cleaning out the snot in their nose, kind of keeping the nasal passages clear. Okay, moving to the inside of the eye. So again, we have the sclera on the outside, the white portion of the eye. In the front of the eye going towards the back, again, we have our cornea on the outside, just a protective, very hard covering to prevent the eye from getting scratched. We have the iris opening and closing to adjust the size of the pupil. Behind the pupil is your lens that helps you to focus the light. So, for example, let's say if you're looking at this on your phone or screen, your lens is focused fairly close to where your head is. Whereas, you know, you can move away from your screen, look off into the distance, and your lens will have to change its shape in order to refocus where that light's coming in, so you can focus now on the door or whatever else is behind you. You know, your kid as in, oh, they're distracted, let me do something. You know, still able to focus the light in order to project it onto the back of the eyeball. So going through the vitreous body. So that's this portion here, clear liquid inside the eye. Again, when we do dissection, you may or may not see it. It might still be, might just be formaldehyde or witch hazel that kind of seeped into the eye. So it's actually more of a jelly-like substance, but most likely it'll be more liquidy when you guys cut open. Okay, so hitting the back of the eyeball, we have our retina section. That's where your photoreceptors that detect the light. And then behind it is your choroid. And that's this darker region that helps absorb any kind of stray light. And then the last part, your information is sent from your retina into your optic nerve. So this portion is where you don't have any photoreceptors, and it's a little blind spot in the back of your eyeball. Your brain just makes up stuff to fill in that gaps where that lack of photoreceptors are. Okay, last part for this video, because I'm running out of space for my phone, so I'll have to make some adjustments and just do the last part of this chapter on a different video. Sorry about that. Okay, so the optical components of the eye that are clear parts of the eye that help to send the image from whatever you're looking at into the back of the eyeball. So they're transparent or clear. And these are the cornea, so on the outside anterior cover of the eye, your aqueous humor, that is the inside filling between the cornea and the lens, so going through the pupil region. Then after you hit the lens, moving through into the vitreous body, so this is a more jelly-like substance that's in between the lens and your retina on the back of the eyeball. So I'll come back and do the last little bit of this chapter in a second. Well, whatever. Yeah. Okay.